not understand the scope or like why that was a terrible idea. You'd be like, no, we need it. My team needs it. And they're like, your team is like 1% of the broader population. Like, no. And so you just realize like implementing certain changes can have a huge impact, a huge scope, a huge time investment. And a lot of times the recruiters or even like your hiring managers or business managers asking for these changes don't understand how big of a change or a lift or effort that is. And nor should they, like that's not their job, but just like the value you place on your tech teams to actually explain why something should or shouldn't happen or why things are the way they are today was a really eye-opening experience.
Hey Hannah, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love it. It's like you've been like thrown into a soundproof booth.
Very professional.
Yeah, it's nice though, but like, there's no echo. It's really, when I go into those kind of booths, those soundproof booths, they're cool. Sometimes it's too silent. I don't know if you've ever had that. It's like I literally can hear my heartbeat in the room. I'm like, I know I don't like all the noise of the floor, but sometimes it's a bit strange when you're in those soundproof booths.
I still put the noise canceling on though on my headphones
that just takes
like,
it to another level. So you're in a soundproof.
There's glass so I can see.
Yeah, I was about to say your senses must be going crazy. It's like you're in a soundproof room, then you've got noise cancelling on. At least you got a window into the world on the other side.
Yeah, I'm just ultra focused all the time.
That's the definition of focused. How's the family? I know last time we spoke, like everyone, like my kids, they're always sick. Is everyone feeling a bit better now?
Yeah. My son has recovered. My husband has recovered. I'm slowly recovering. So yeah, we're all hanging in there.
We're both thinking, what's next?
I just wait for the call from daycare.
Yeah, what's the gift of daycare is going to give us next? As well. Glad to hear everyone's doing well. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and your journey to the role that you're in now.
Yeah, so I'm currently at Wayfair. I work, our office is located in Boston. I live out in the suburbs right outside of Boston. But my journey to Wayfair, so before Wayfair, which I've been here for, it'll be 6 years next month, which is wild to think about. But before Wayfair, I was with Keurig Green Mountain Coffee Company. I was there for just over a year, doing kind of like a blended campus recruitment program and employer branding type role. And then before that, I was with Apple for about 6.5 years through a variety type of roles. So really my career started with Apple, and I joined as a part-time sales associate while I was still in my undergrad. And after I graduated, got accepted into Apple has what's called a Apple Store Leader program. So it's a 2-year management development program, kind of cycle through all the different types of roles. After that, I really fell in love with the people manager role. So think of it as like an HR generalist role. After that time with Apple, I went to Keurig, like I mentioned. I did a kind of TA/employer branding type role, managing different social pages for them, and then was tapped by Wayfair to come and build out their PhD campus recruiting program for data science. And so came out and built out that global program, built out a team here, knew I didn't really want to stick in recruiting for the foreseeable future. So kind of thought about what's next, what are some transferable skills, but really love the talent in the people space. And so moved over to the team, which was called TA operations or talent acquisition operations, TA tech, some companies call it. To that team managing our talent acquisition tech stack. So the back end of all the tools that our talent acquisition teams use, and have been managing that team since, and then just recently transitioned to a broader type role across all of talent, managing the product management scope across all of our talent tools, inclusive of our TA tech stack.
Nice.
That's where I am today.
You've done pretty well there. That's pretty concise.
Yeah.
Are you playing?
Told that story a few times.
Yeah. I it's such an interesting journey because you've been on both sides now. You were the recruiter, using some of these tools. So you've got the perspective of as someone using it every day in your job, and now you're on the other side of helping design those systems, processes, and obviously implement the tools to support those recruiters. So what have you learned from being on one side versus now being on the other end
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
probably didn't understand as a recruiter, maybe?
Oh my gosh. I remember transitioning to that new team, the TA operations type role, being more on the back end.
Yeah.
And within my first few weeks onboarding, I was like, oh my God, I was that annoying recruiter who would just ask for everything under the sun and like not understand the scope or like why that was a terrible idea. You'd be like, no, we need it. My team needs it. And they're like, your team is like 1% of the broader population. Like, no. And so you just realize like, implementing certain changes can have a huge, huge impact, a huge scope, a huge time investment. And a lot of times the recruiters or even like your hiring managers or business managers asking for these changes don't understand how big of a change or a lift or effort that is. And nor should they, like that's not their job, but just like the value you place on your tech teams to actually explain why something should or shouldn't happen or why things are the way they are today was a really eye-opening experience when I first joined and still is to this
Yeah.
day.
So interesting. It's always interesting in hindsight when you get to see the other side, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's not as easy as clicking a button and everything works and changes. So as part of this, your role as head of talent, technology, product management, this is part of an overall strategic transformation that the organization's going through. Walk us through the why. What was the decision making, the business case of why you're going through this tech transformation within TA? I think also overall, right, within the business, you're going through quite a big transformation. So you could just talk about a bit about the why and the business
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. And this actually started several years ago. So we used to sit within HR. So the TA operations or TA tech team, whatever you want to call it, sat within HR. And what we found was for the managing our TA tech stack, we were working so closely with our internal engineering team. So we had at the time a very much build versus buy mentality. So, we had a handful of third-party tools and a handful of homegrown tools that were talking to each other. And the argument was, we could really sync up our roadmaps. We could work more cohesively and really do some transformational things for the business if we were really seated closer with our tech partners. And so we made the transition for our team to move from HR within the tech organization, which was a big shift. And that allowed us to really align our roadmaps, to really be thoughtful about like what should the holistic end user experience be? Again, still within this world of just TA tech. And then more recently, over this last year, we've gone through this transition again of looking at our broader talent tech team. And so TA tech was kind of one vertical within talent tech. And we had several teams that were really focused on just a small subset of tools. And what happened is like that span of tools grew. We were chasing a lot of point solutions to solve really like niche end user problems. And rightfully so, like the team's scope was really deep in that area. But what we lacked was this holistic view of like, what should the end-to-end candidate to employee experience be? And all of the solutions that touch that part of the experience. And so what we did was we completely blew up these teams. We had a TA tech team, we had a workday team, we had an engineering team. And we moved to atomic teams, which is just a fancy word for saying
it's the best thing ever. I want to be part of the atomic team.
I know it sounds like you're part of like a superhero crew or something.
Yeah.
But really, it's a fancy term for like a cross-functional team. And so now within a talent tech organization, we have several teams which are made up of all the right people to get the right work done. And they're focused on aspects of the user experience. So, the team doesn't just have one type of role. We have a product manager for that team. We have a tech lead for that team. We have engineers for that team, software and data engineers, designers, things like that. So we can be much more agile in how we approach our roadmap or things we want to do, and also just more innovative and not be so focused on like, well, this team just owns this one tool. They own this experience, which encompasses several tools, and they need to understand how all of those tools work together and enhance that end user experience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we landed today. And I mean, very much still figuring it out and making sure that everything is working as we'd like.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of companies now moving to the similar model, right? In order to be agile and bringing different expertise from different cross functions together to solve problems. It's incredible to see. I think we've been talking about this for years to do this, but now finally, I think COVID was actually a big part of it, where companies started collaborating and bringing different parts of companies together.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, this does work. And
Yeah.
we can, and also there's it removes this sort of us and them mentality sometimes that exists in companies. You're kind of you're all pulling in different directions, and it just causing a lot of conflict and a lot of red tape and just frustration, honestly, that happens as well. So that's really, what are some of the challenges we were facing in the previous model that now are becoming much easier to resolve, and also the benefits?
Yeah, really solving for our end users. And to go back on your earlier point, like I think part of that happened was, I mean, when you think about company structure, like you're looking at the industry and like it's industry standard, like these are where certain teams sit within the organization. So to really break that mold and be like, sure, that's what the industry is doing, but like for us, it actually makes sense to like, let's move this team over to the tech organization. And here's all the reasons that it's going to work. And so I think you're slowly starting to see companies break away from that mold and kind of do what's right for them, and see the benefits of like other companies who did something similar. But to your second question, the challenges we were facing is, again, because we had a mix of homegrown tools and third-party tools, is we would be spending time with our end users, really understanding, you know, what are their pain points? What do they want? They would come back to us and we would say, okay, we hear you. This is what we think needs to be done. We actually need to work with engineering to do that. So then we go to engineering, who has their own roadmap. They've done their own 6-month and 12-month plan. And they're like, sounds great. We can get to that, you know, maybe in the next 6 months or in a year. And we're like, no, but our end users want it now. And we think it's really valuable. And so now, kind of being part of this one larger team, we roadmap together. And so we're very strategic around, like, we do our 6-month planning cycles, and we're planning all of our work together. And so we're going to our end users in the business and saying, okay, like, what's your wish list? What do you want to do? Here's what we think you should do. And we narrow down and prioritize that list with our stakeholders. And we make sure that all the teams involved all are working together to say, like, great, this is what we're going to commit to for the next 6 months. And so it's no longer like, okay, yeah, we're really excited about this idea, but it's going to take like another year until this team over here can do it. So it's way more collaborative, and builds a lot more trust. And like, you're much more able to be a thought leader to your stakeholders, than you were before, where you're just trying to like herd cats of several different teams towards a common vision.
Before, you were in some ways also an order, just become you're an order taker, as opposed to being a real strategic partner.
So reactive versus proactive.
Yes, 100%. Love that. So now you've done that. You kind of set you set the vision. You know, kind of what you're solving for. Next stage is the build. What were the considerations that you had about, you know, when you went out there to look into the marketplace? Originally you built internally. It sounds like you made a decision, obviously, to go external. What were the list of requirements that you and the team, when you sat around together and said, this is what we need this product to deliver, or this solution for us to achieve that? Walk us through for some of those, the list that you said you created.
Yeah. So even before we had like formal product managers as part of our broader team, we followed a lot of the product management principles. And so like evaluating, you know, an ATS, we sat down with our end users to really understand, to an extent, what their pain points are, right? Like, we didn't want to just pick up what we had today and move it to the new system, but it's still important to understand, like, what are their pain points with the current tools that we have? And then overlay that with, like, what's your vision? Like, what's your ideal state? Pretend like sky is the limit. What do you want this to look like? And that was, you know, sitting in a room in a 2-day design session with one of our in-house designers, and like going through all these different types of exercises and really challenging them, to really think about, like, okay, and, you know, 5 years from now, what would perfect look like for you? And then
is this with the recruiting team? Like, who is the end users you're talking about right now?
A mix. So we had some of our talent partners, like our HR partners, our recruiters, our recruiting leaders, our head of talent acquisition. Cool. So really a broad range, because we want so many different perspectives. And what was really cool about those sessions is we invited what we called like lightning talks. We invited different people from the business to provide their perspective and their vision to kind of tee up before we went into the actual design sessions. So everyone kind of had an idea of like, oh, this is like generally where we want to go. Like, now let's help design it. And then we took all of that information and then we overlaid that with all like the industry standards, industry best practices, like where is the industry going, right? Like we don't expect our internal end users to understand where the industry is going necessarily, especially when it comes to tech. And so overlaying a lot of that, and then really breaking out where we had like a RFP scorecard, which is basically a list of requirements that's absolutely critical, nice to have, need to have. Going out to the market, we market mapped 30 plus vendors of just like our own research, narrow that down to, let's say, like 10, further narrow it down after conversations and demos to like 4 or 5.
How long that period take?
Like a year.
A year, really? Okay, wow.
It's a process, but it also, I will say, it depends on the tool size, right? Like we've done this for much smaller tools, like candidate texting tools or even assessment tools are a much smaller scale that you can do it much quicker than a full-blown ATS, where you're like, the switching costs, like we have to get this right. We don't have to move in the next few years. So yeah, it's a journey and it's a process, but like absolutely something you need to make sure you get pretty close to perfect.
Yeah. So you've narrowed it down. What would give us the top 5 or key requirements? Like you mentioned, you got the priorities, but what were the main ones that came out of all those meetings, all those discussions you had? What were the sort of top 5, let's say, requirements that came out of that?
We boiled it down. So our most recent big RFP we did was for applicant tracking system and CRM, a number of different solutions bundled in one for our high volume space. So that's our frontline warehouse, call centers, physical retail. So a very specific population. And the big requirements there were it had to be mobile first because we knew we want to meet our end users where they are, and that's where they are. They want to be able to do everything on their phone. It needed to have the right level of automation. And so we didn't want a completely no touch process. Like our culture is really important to us. But we wanted the candidate to be able to drive the process forward. And so a level of automation that the candidate can control the process, and also a level of automation that allows our recruiters to not be stuck doing daily admin tasks, but to do what we hired them to do, which was be great recruiters, to sell candidates, to engage top talent, to source candidates. So those were like the big things that we anchored on. And it had to be customizable, right? Like, yes, we want to scale and we want things to be streamlined, but we also need to be able to customize things for us that make sense to us, versus just trying to have this approach of like one size fits all. So those were the core things. And then obviously within those have like a subset of requirements to fulfill those big 3.
And what that one of those requirements, I'm sure, is connecting with the existing systems that you got in place as well.
Yeah.
All right. Who pulled the final trigger? Made the final decision on that?
It was a joint effort. We're very like you have all those requirements to just kind of give you a picture of like how we actually do all that. I'm only
playing, by the way. You don't have to go.
It's like a whiteboard, and then there's just. It's a lot, but there's scoring and there's ranking. It's very thoughtful.
What's so you might as well reveal the tool that you use, because everyone's probably listening right now like, okay, this is great, who are you using?
What is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we landed with Avature for our high volume applicant tracking system. We also have their CRM, so their CRM and ATS. They're a platform tool. As well as their event solution, referrals, internal. We kind of did this big bang approach for our high volume population.
Can you give me an example of like, I think we talk about ATSs all the time, but can you give me an example of how like you've designed the employee lifecycle and employee experience in the platform? Can you give me like a specific use case of how you've done that?
Yeah. So when we talk about like mobile first and also the level of automation, through what we built with Avature, we automated from what we had today around 70% of the workflow. So you think about like how much time back that is for the recruiter, how much quicker the candidate is moving. And I forget the data offhand, but like substantially quicker, days quicker moving through the process. But basically, just thinking about the applicant tracking system, the candidate applies. There's a series of, certain pre-qualifications that the system will run through to really make sure that by the time they get to a recruiter, that the recruiter is only engaging with qualified, engaged candidates. Another big problem I think we saw, as well as probably like every company out there, is around ghosting candidates and making sure you're getting back to candidates in a timely way. And so how many times have you applied to a job or heard of someone applying to a job? Like, I applied and 2 years later, I've never heard of anything. That doesn't happen with us and how we've built Avature. And so we've built basically automation that at any candidate driven step, if they're not engaging back with us after, I think the time frame's like 2 weeks, like we will automatically move them into a talent pool and keep them warm in our CRM. If not, like they will continue to move through the applicant tracking system. So obviously we have third-party assessments that help further pre-qualify candidates. The candidate drives the scheduling process for scheduling out their interview. And then we've automated the entire offer process, the background check process, and the hire process. So when you think about like someone actually gets hired and moves into our HCM, that's all automated too. So it's a much quicker process and a hands-off process, but still the right level of hands-on to make sure we're maintaining our cultural values during that hiring process.
That really helps obviously you on the back end, but also but how has that changed the candidate's experience on their end? You mentioned one thing in terms of not ghosting them, but what other ways has it improved the candidate experience?
Yeah. With this population, what we found through all of our user research upfront before even signing on with Avature is that it is highly, highly competitive. These frontline type warehouse roles, really what this population values is a paycheck and how quickly they can actually get a job. And so through automating this entire process, candidates can, apply and get hired and start the next day within a much shorter time frame than they were previously. And so when you think about like that perception to that population of Wayfair and how do I get a job at Wayfair, it's much quicker and they're in control. They're not, throwing their resume in this black hole and saying like, well, I hope someone gets back to me. Like they hear instantly whether they're moving forward or not, and then can determine how quickly they want to move forward. So it puts the power back in their hands, and also it meets them where they are when we talk about also offering like a mobile first experience.
100%, because a lot of frontline workers, some of them don't even have an email, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the only way you're going to be able to interact with them and communicate with them. And you are right, it's very competitive, especially for frontline workers. It's the difference between who gets back to them first. That's a lot of the cases, like
the name of the game.
That's the list now. Like it's not even all about the best. Of course, they care about the company they work for, etc. But in many frontline worker jobs, it's really like I need a job, and if Wayfair doesn't come back to me before this company, I'm going to go work there. So for you, it's a massive competitive advantage to have a system in place that enables that, right? And then again, like you said, if it doesn't happen, then you build your talent pool. They move into your talent pool, which you can continue to nurture, engage with them, and build that anyway, as well. Which in the past we've never been able to do that at scale.
Yeah,
right?
And we've struggled with it because I think with this population, how our recruiters are using our CRM is so different than the corporate population. Like they're not really going out and sourcing candidates off of third-party sites. They're using it as like a rehire engine tool. And so, in this frontline space, you're hiring so many seasonal and temp hires to make it through your peak seasons of hiring. And so to be able to have that population of like folks you hire, or even folks that you came close to hiring, but maybe, we didn't need the additional headcount for that season, like they're automatically being kind of flowed back into your CRM. And then it's easy for recruiters to go back and say like, oh shoot, you know what? We actually just had an increase in headcount demand for this upcoming season. Let me just go back to this pool of candidates that we already have. And a lot of them being rehires are like, I loved working at Wayfair. I had a great experience. I would love to come back. So it's really enabled the team too to just like move a lot quicker and respond to the business's, fluctuating demands a lot easier than in the past.
Yeah. I know this really varies, but how long did it take you to implement?
So for us, it was just over 12 months, which I know to a lot of people sounds like, oh my gosh, that seems like such a long time. But when you think about like, if you were to, implement a CRM separately, an ATS separately, an events platform separately, like we did it all at one time.
So when you say that, you mean not just Avature, as in you did all of the different all of the tech stack over 12 months, or just Avature?
Just Avature.
Wow.
But Avature has we have multiple solutions with them. So they're, more of like a platform than different ones. So implementing all of those solutions.
What are the different solutions that you used? What other parts did you implement in as part of this process?
Yeah, so you have your ATS, you have your CRM, we have an events platform with them.
Mm-hmm.
We have our scheduling portal with them, our external career site, our internal career
Oh
site,
wow.
our
Okay.
referrals portal.
Okay. Okay.
um,
A
there's
lot.
probably an agency portal, a few others, and then you think of all the third party integrations that
Yeah,
then plug
yeah, yeah, yeah.
into
Okay.
all of that.
Now that makes sense. Okay. I
Yeah,
was thinking that's okay. I was like, okay, that seems quite long, but now based on what you just said, that makes sense.
yeah.
As well. How did the one of the big challenges is how did this land with your team? You know, because it's really fundamentally changing the way that they work. Like you said, doing what they're good
Mhm.
at, having meaningful conversations, removing some of the admin. But what was the best strategy? What do you think worked best in terms of bringing, introducing it to the team?
Yeah, I think for this type of team or any company's like TA tech team or just being in this space, like to go through that size of an implementation is really like a once or twice in a career type opportunity. It's not often that a company is really completely redoing or re-implementing part of their tech stack. And so I think getting them on board with just like how exciting is that for your own career development? But then the other part of that, what really just got us excited about this tool in general is how customizable it was. We were coming a lot from some of our tech stack, which was kind of off the shelf, or it's hard to be able to solve for your end users when they're coming and saying, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z. And we're like, but the tech doesn't allow that. And it's a third party tool. So we're kind of, our hands are tied.
Yeah.
Where with the tech stack we've built today, being highly customizable was something was a critical need of ours. And so now they're so much more empowered to actually work with our end users, spend time understanding like, what do they want? Why do they want it? What's the problem they're solving? And then they get to go back, or my team gets to go back and say like, okay, how do we want to design this? And like, what are all the things we should think about? And so they kind of, geek out in that way of like really getting to flex their tech skills and understanding how the system works, but also being able to like say yes more to our end users than what felt like we were just always saying no or maybe or kind of. Those were the big things that really got them on
Yeah.
board and excited.
That's a really good point, right? You like it's very rare. It's a once in a couple, not, but yeah, it could be a once in a career moment that you get an opportunity to completely reshape it and be part of that journey. It's very rare. A lot of the times you
Yeah.
join a company and you're just like, this is what we do. This is how we do
Yeah.
it. This is how we do it. This is what I got to work. I've got to work within the confines of what we
hmm
have. But you've been on this journey, and I love the fact that, and that's why we started. I had the question earlier of how did you bring them on the journey. So when it comes to actually rolling it out, they've already been part of the design. They're already
Yeah.
engaged. They felt like they know what it means for them and their role, right? A lot of companies, they end up embedding a software and then they try and bring people on the journey and then they
Yeah.
realize, no, it's a bit late for that now, right? So you almost don't have to do any selling on the other end because they've been part of the journey
Yeah.
with you the whole way.
The tech team for sure. The other thing that we did that worked really well, and this is kudos to, we have a partner team, what's called TA enablement. So a lot of companies will have like a process enablement team.
Mm-hmm.
We have one dedicated in the TA space. And so, they were helping with a lot of the requirements, discovery, and things like that. But they were our partner through and through. And something that they helped stand up was what we called our TA champions. And so through
Nice.
this year-long implementation, we had designated point people across like every vertical of TA, varying levels, and they were engaged in the decision-making process from the very beginning all the way until we rolled out. And then they were our champions to then get their teams further bought in. And so, we have hundreds of recruiters globally. And so that's a big feat for, a smaller team to be like, here's this new tool, you should really like it. And here's all the reasons. Like these TA champions know what their recruiters care about and can really help sell them and
Nice.
get them engaged, and also hold them accountable when you think about like system compliance and just making sure that they're using the tool the way that they want. They're the ones looking at their data every day and talking to their hiring managers and business managers. So they want to make sure they're using the system in the correct way to make sure that the data matches the work that they're doing
Yeah.
with the tool.
Yeah. Well, they're the ones living and breathing it every day, right?
Yeah.
So you want them to be, they don't want to feel like it's something being done to them.
Yes.
They want to feel like
Yeah.
they're part of the journey, right? And they're talking to people like them that live and breathe the same role and and do the same work as well, right? So
Mhm.
how do you identify those people?
Yeah, so part of it was by level, right?
Okay.
So, you obviously have like a lead by every vertical.
Hmm.
And then through nomination, so working with those levels to say like, hey, like who's a really strong end user,
Okay.
who's like your go-to subject matter expert, who's maybe helping train up other people on the team, who has really good rapport with your team. And so part of it was, yeah, nomination, and recommendations from the senior leadership at that
Yeah.
point.
Really random question. Are you using any of the like video interviewing? Uh,
Not video, not
just
today.
not just
No,
random.
no. I think there's been some expressed interest. I think there always is of like, how do recruiters get more time back? And interviewing is such a big time investment for
Yeah.
them.
Hmm.
So we haven't, at least in the high volume space, we haven't
Yeah, no, I get
done
it.
anything
It
like that.
wouldn't make sense in high volume. It would be kind of
Yeah.
crazy to,
Yeah.
to do that. What about from I'm just thinking through the lens of DEI. How has this changed the approach of making sure that you're making a fair and equal playing field for everyone?
Yeah.
Has this had an impact there? I know it's a bit of a random question, but just came to
No,
mind.
I think the more you remove that human element in a way helps. And so, we have our application pre-screen questions, which are all skill-based. We have assessments. And so, it's measuring you on the assessment of your role and the role and your
Yeah.
skill set. And so by the time they actually get to a recruiter, we're saying like, this person is qualified on paper and by skill for the role that they are interviewing for.
Hmm.
And so at most of the time for this population, that recruiter interview call is really a sell call, and to make sure like, hey, is the shift you're interested the one we're offering still? Like, does that match up? Are you interested still, now that you've gone through the process, now that you've had a chance to ask me questions? And it's more of like a sell call in a way
Yeah.
than an actual interview than you think of like in the corporate space where maybe are doing like a case interview or a panel interview or anything like that.
Again, if you're going to have a call, you want to get all of those other things out the way. You can do
Yeah.
that through the onboarding process, all of those things. You don't want to spend valuable time talking about some of those. Like, do you have a driving license? Because you're
Yeah,
because you're going
exactly.
to be driving trucks. like you can
Yeah.
do. I know there's a silly example, but also it doesn't waste their time either, right? Going
Mm-hmm.
through the entire process, so that makes sense. What would you say is like how many years now? What journey you've been on this journey for?
Oh, so we just went live with Avature last June, but we like kicked off this process, I would say, back in 2021 was
Hmm.
really when we kind of got to this inflection point where we said the tech stack we have today is, it's not meeting our needs. And again, it was initially focused really in the high volume space because that's where we're seeing the largest growth. That's our footprint is growing. And so we said like, how do we keep up with that scale without just continuing to hire more recruiters to hire against that? And so we got to this inflection point where we said like, we think we need to kind of split our tech stack off and like, let's really hyper focus in the high volume space. That's where it seems to need the most attention. Our corporate space, like,
Hmm.
say like, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it in a way. But it was not the most broken. So, focusing on the high volume space and yeah, then going through that like design session, RFP, industry mapping process, and then a 12-month implementation, you quickly get to where we are today.
Yeah. What looking back, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Ooh, this move now for like the industry consolidating tech stacks, because hindsight's 2020. Like, should we just have done everything at once? Yeah, we were like, oh, we're really ahead of our time and we're splitting our tech stack because we're really solving for the candidates and the end users and being really hyper focused in that space, which like we still are now moving towards like, okay, do we think about consolidating tech stacks? But it's just a complete opposite shift from where we were thought wise back in 2021.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing some of that work now.
Yeah. What advice would you give to yourself looking back? If you
Oh,
if you because there's going to be
where
people
to
listening right
begin?
now. Yeah, there's going to be people listening right now that are at the beginning of that journey or even in the exploratory stage. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think just engaging as many people from the business as possible early on. Like I think we did a pretty decent job at that, and I think that definitely helped with our adoption and our buy-in. But like
Mm-hmm.
it is always better to over communicate and thoughtfully over involve certain end users and stakeholders. And we've started doing that in a recent RFP we're doing, and like you can already see it's going to make things that much easier going forward. And so even like when we think back to the design sessions, like it was a smaller subset of people, which it had to be, right? You can't have like 500 people in the room, but are you more thoughtful about like how you actually share out those results or the purpose of it or the journey that you're on, and not make it seem like it's like this behind closed doors decision that's being made.
Yeah.
Even if they have no say in the decision, at least like keeping them informed of the process will absolutely help more with adoption and buy-in, and just like more transparent feedback from your end users who feel like they can reach out and be like, hey, like I know you worked on this, I have some thoughts, like are you open to hearing them?
Yeah. What would you say is this, what this has done for your personal growth?
It has definitely stretched me. Doing an implementation of that size was my first, and the amount of internal teams that are involved, plus you're managing so many third-party vendors, or at least for us, so many third-party vendors that had to plug into these tools. You're flexing your project management skill, your people development skills, and then you spend from 2021 to this past June when we rolled out, you spent all that time living and breathing this implementation to then be like, okay, we crossed the finish line, we got it over, and you're like, your job's not even done. Like
It
now
just
this
starts.
is your job.
Yeah.
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 To
Like
maintain this
that's what people don't
tool.
realize, right? Like literally
Yeah.
the moment you go like that, that's like, it starts after that. And then it's
Yeah.
an ongoing journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you kind of delayed this, like, how does your team successfully operate in the business of like maintaining tools after the fact? Like you're in an implementation, like every day what you're doing. You have a project plan day to day for 12 months. And you get to the end of that and you're like, okay, like how do we actually want to manage our team to be able to do that? So we sprinted to agile methodology. We work off of 2-week sprints. We train the team up in that. And so like we had to completely rethink how do we sustain what we just built for the foreseeable future, and make sure like one, we don't burn out our team, but also we can handle all the further change that's going to come once you roll out a brand new tool to the business.
Yeah. Have you had to hire any specific skill sets within your own team to help support this? If so, what? And
Yeah, completely different. Like if I was hiring someone, 2021 or earlier, I would say a completely different skill set than I look for today, where before, and it's not to say like we aren't open to like non-tech people in a way, but I would say before, and like even me, I came from recruiting. Someone else on the team came from another operations type role, like no like TA tech stack or even talent experience. Where I'd say now, with how customizable and how we have built the tech stack and also moving into the tech space, like are definitely looking for folks with more of a tech background. Again, maybe not necessarily in the TA tech space, but like have they
transferable skills
managed a tool at that level, where that wasn't necessarily always the focus in the past, but with the type of tool that we have today, that's absolutely a required skill set that we look for.
Looking back, would you have hired some of those people earlier?
Maybe, but like I don't think we were lacking anything. Our team rocks.
Amazing.
It's still the same team.
That's great.
It's the same team. And what I love with our team is it's all internal moves. So like I was a product of internal mobility, moved from TA to this operations role. And 2 of the other people on our team were also products of internal mobility. And so I think there is value of having one, internal folks who like know the business, know the teams. Yeah. But then also like learning as you go and learning together as a team as you go, it really helps with morale.
Of course.
And they built that tool from the ground up. So like no one knows it better than they do.
That's amazing. Like credit to you and the team for having the growth mindset, and for the company for creating that psychological safety for you to go out there and do that. That says a lot. That says a lot about the culture of the business. As well, because that's what are you most excited about as you think about the future and the roadmap you have in front of you?
Yeah. So now we have kind of this renewed focus. We've gotten our high volume population in a steady state with Avature, which is really exciting, and kind of starting to think through like, all right, like what's next for high volume? Like where would we like to go? But also this renewed focus on our corporate space. And so, like we said, there's this appetite to consolidate tech stacks. And so we're in this evaluation phase of like, what does that actually mean for us? Understanding all their requirements and, what does their future look like? And then kind of mapping out the next 1-2 years. And so feels like a little bit like doing this all again.
I was about to say, you're going all day around again.
Yeah. But at least this time, like we're not starting from scratch.
You've you've kind of built up that muscle. You've done the reps, a lot of reps. You've trained the team on agile. You've put all of the frameworks in place. You've built the trust and credibility with the business, which takes time and it's easy to lose, as hard to gain. So a lot of that, so much hard work you've done up front that will make this next stage. You've already got a clear vision of how you're gonna execute on it. I know it's not going to be easy, of course, to do that. You're certainly not going to be having a lack of work yourself personally anytime soon. What are you most excited about when you think about work in the role, Wayfair? What makes you smile? Like what are you most excited about?
I think now with this newly expanded role, like I have always been so hyper focused in the TA space, which I love. That's where I started my career, but really kind of stepping out of my comfort zone in a way and, expanding over to being like, what do we do for compensation? What do we do for benefits? What do we do for performance? All the different areas of talent now having to consider that, and how our tech stack really is cohesive or should be cohesive, really going back and questioning of like, why did we build things? Like, we look at certain things that we've done. We're like, why did we build that? And we're like, well, I think it was like so-and-so's decision who was here 5 years ago. They're not here anymore, but like no one's ever questioned it. So just really taking the time to understand like what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then seeing like, where do we go from there?
Yeah. Another benefit of the atomic teams, right? You're being exposed to those different functions. They're being exposed to you, and all of those things of like reassessing, reimagining how these gets done and how that impacts the employee experience, the candidate experience. Super exciting.
When you think about like the TA tech space, we had our TA tech team and we had our HCM team. And again, when you think about the candidate lifecycle, like those two tools are so tightly integrated, yet those two teams couldn't have been more separated.
That's
and
crazy
so now through the atomic, I know. So now through that atomic team, they're actually a blended team and they're getting cross-trained. And so our HCM folks will start configuring Avature. Our Avature folks will start configuring our HCM.
Amazing. Well, we'll leave it there. We'll have to do part 2. I'll message you in 12 months.
I was gonna say, give me a year.
Give you a year, and then you can give us the. You're gonna come back to me and be like, yeah, we're separating out now. We're not consolidating.
The industry has switched again.
The industry has switched once again. But honestly, congratulations to you and the team. Thank you for sharing your journey and experience with everyone. And parting piece of advice, what would you give? And then we'll say goodbye.
Ooh, parting advice. Trust your team. I couldn't do my job without them. They are just the smartest, brightest people. And so trust them, ask their advice, ask their feedback constantly, and let them run with things. They know your tools better probably than you do at this point.
That's why you hired them, right? in the first place. Listen, Hannah, thanks so much for coming on the show, and I wish you all the best. I'll check in with you in 12 months. See you later.
Sounds good. Talk then. Bye.